check out our streaming schedule for this week. We've got tons of content in terms of the NFL and college football, as we're going live just about every single day this week. So make sure you hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single moment where we go live. And now, on with our feature presentation. I want to flash back to the 2017 AFC Championship game for a moment, as painful as it's going to be as a Jaguars fan, especially knowing how far this team has fallen. There were many, and I truly mean it, many reasons why the Jaguars collapsed in this game right here. You can thank the defense not being able to stop a 3rd and 18. You can thank Brad Nortman shanking a punt down in the end zone. You can thank some questionable refereeing if you want. However, the biggest reason for me was what happened to the offense in the second half. Because the Jaguars broke the quintessential rule of football. You always ride the hot hand. If something's working, then you stick with it, especially when the other stuff isn't working. And this absolutely applied with this man right here in third-year running back Corey Grant. Unless you were a Jaguars fan, you had no idea who he was. He was the guy that would occasionally appear on special teams as a kick returner and on fake punts about once a month. But other than that, he was pretty quiet. However, if you were a Jaguars fan, you knew about his burst and how shifty he could be. Sure enough, in the first half, the Jaguars decided that it was time to unleash him to the world. As when I said that the Patriots had no answers for him, I truly mean it. Grant had not one, not two, but 3 plays go for 15+ yards in the first half. Get him in open space with blockers, and he was gone. He was off to the races. And then, in the second half, the Jaguars just decided to stop using him. I don't know what Nathaniel Hackett, the offensive coordinator, was thinking, but it was one of the most baffling things I'd ever seen in my life when it came to the Jaguars. Here was a guy who was an offensive menace in the first half, and a man who was moving the ball every time he touched it and had it in his hands, and a man who seemed impossible to bring down. And the Jaguars, just 30 minutes away from the Super Bowl, are going to decide not to go his way and get it in his hands anymore? It didn't make sense. The Jaguars lost that game in part because they refused to ride the hot hand. In the fourth quarter, on the 3 drives that they were leading, the Jaguars accrued 30 yards of offense and 1 first down. That was it. And Corey Grant got 0 touches. Do the Jaguars win the game if they play Corey Grant more? Who's to say? But not riding the hot hand was an absolutely massive mistake that still haunts Jacksonville to this day. Now, that piece of history absolutely terrifies me and haunts me every day as a Jaguars fan. But if you like learning more about the history of the NFL, and hopefully history that won't haunt you for the rest of your life, then this is the place for you. Because we talk about all things NFL history all the time with a new video every single day and a live stream every single day. So if you like that sort of stuff, then be sure to hit that like button down below, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we post on the channel. Thanks in advance for your support as we try and hit 70,000 subscribers. And today's story, in honor of Thanksgiving coming up if you're watching as of this video getting released, is another quintessential example of refusing to ride the hot hand for some inexplicable reason. This man right here is Cleveland Browns running back Barry Redden, pictured here with the Los Angeles Rams, as in the team he spent the most time with. And on Thanksgiving Day in 1989, as a member of the Cleveland Browns, he was involved in one of the most bizarre coaching strategies you'll see. Imagine if you're a basketball player and you're not a good shooter, as you're constantly missing all your free throws. One day, you decide to change your approach at the line, and instead of taking 2 dribbles before you shoot, you only take 1. That day, in the first half, you go 10 for 10 and don't miss a single one. And then, in the second half, you inexplicably decide to go back to your old strategy, and you're only hitting 40% of the time in the second half as a result. You get rid of the one thing that's working for you, the one thing that has gone well all day, and it backfires miserably. And on Thanksgiving in 1989, that's exactly what the Cleveland Browns did with Barry Redden. Because 35 years later, this is the story behind one of the worst coaching decisions in the history of the NFL on Thanksgiving. Before I talk about the actual incident in question and what made it so bizarre, we need some context to understand how the game itself was going, as well as the game's importance. aside from the usual aspect of it being a nationally televised game because it's on Thanksgiving. It's November 23rd, 1989. It's week 12 of the NFL season, and we have an interconference game on our hands over at the Pontiac Silverdome between the Cleveland Browns and the Detroit Lions. For the Lions, this game meant absolutely nothing outside of pride. They were one of the worst teams in football, sitting ugly with a 2-9 record and boasting the second worst record in the league, only one game better than the 1-10 Dallas Cowboys. They have the second worst defense in the conference, the second worst offense in the conference, and the second worst point differential in the conference. And aside from the sensational play of their first-round rookie running back Barry Sanders, who had lived up to the hype and then some already, nothing was going right for Detroit in 1989. But for the Cleveland Browns, for the visitors, yeah, this game meant the world to them, especially against a really bad Detroit team on paper. Cleveland entered this one with a 7-3-1 record, leading the AFC Central by half a game on the Houston Oilers. Win this one, and give yourself a cushion heading into the final quarter of the season in a super tight division race, with all four teams in the division being between 5 and 7 wins, and you put yourself in a good spot heading into December to make it back to the playoffs for the 5th straight season. This game should be a cakewalk on paper, right? A 7-3-1 team that hadn't lost any of their last 5 games, going up against a team with nothing to play for and one of the worst teams in football. This should be easy. However, it was anything but that, as with just over a minute left in the first half, the Browns actually found themselves trailing 10-3, thanks in part to this play, a 27-yard touchdown pass to Richard Johnson. Cleveland's offense seemed to be stuck in the mud, unable to get anything going, especially on the ground, which we'll get more into in just a bit. But despite Cleveland's struggles, they were still very much in this. This game was far from over. If they could get a score right before the halftime break, march down the field, and find a way to tie it up, we were looking at a completely different ballgame. Sure enough, that's exactly what happened, because with roughly 1:07 to go, the Browns were about to get a massive spark offensively and answer the Richard Johnson touchdown. May I introduce you to Barry Redden? And if you didn't know the name before this game, well, now you knew.
Is out, and Barry Redden comes in. Shotgun Kozar. 1:16 left in the half. Draw play to Redden. Big hole. Barry Redden, the former Ram, former Charger, has a touchdown.
What a run. What an incredible run. The ballgame is now tied up thanks to that 38-yard run by Barry Redden in what was his first touchdown as a member of the Browns. Redden's career had been a bit of a disappointment thus far, as he was widely hailed as a massive draft bust. Despite getting drafted by the Los Angeles Rams in the first round of the 1982 NFL Draft, he didn't do anything of note, finishing his 5 seasons in Los Angeles with under 300 yards per season and just 6 rushing touchdowns. The Rams would draft a much better running back a few years later by the name of Eric Dickerson. You may have heard of him before. After playing 2 seasons in San Diego and carrying the ball just 30 times for 76 yards, and after not doing a lot in Cleveland before this play, with just 8 rushing attempts in his last 10 games, he came into the game and delivered a huge run. Head coach Bud Carson said on the decision to put him in and said on that play, he has fresh legs. The wide receivers also did a fine blocking job on that touchdown run. And while yes, they did a great job blocking, Redden also did a ton of work himself, getting to the corner and making a few guys miss. He was electric. This was the man the Rams thought they were getting when they drafted him in the first round back in 1982. This was the man that looked like one of the best runners in football. This was a huge run to tie it up. So, guess how many more carries Redden got the rest of the way? Go on, take a wild guess. You would think he'd be involved in the second half game plan. There's still 30.5 minutes left in this one. You would think after that run that you would have to find some way to get him involved and have him contribute, especially with how porous the offense had been otherwise, and with how porous the running game had been otherwise. So, how many carries did Redden get the rest of the way?
Well, it's 0. That means it's nothing. 0 is nothing. Zip, nada.
That's right, 0. Barry Redden, who got 38 yards on his first carry and a touchdown, did not get a single carry in the second half. He was not hurt. It was not a disciplinary decision. There were no mitigating factors into this. Barry Redden, simply put, did not touch the ball again. His final stat line was 1 carry for 38 yards and a touchdown. And this was a problem, seeing as the Browns would not score again, losing the game by a final score of 13-10. The one time it seemed as though Cleveland was moving the ball, it was when Barry Redden got it. Then, they just don't go to him anymore? But, okay, maybe this decision makes some sense if you realize how the rest of the running game was playing. If you had a guy who was getting 200 yards and was averaging 6 yards a carry, or you had a great 1-2 punch to the point where you couldn't find a way to squeeze in another carry for Redden, or you were playing Redden at some other position where he was more effective, I guess that could make some sense. However, the Browns finished the game with just 70 yards rushing, and that includes the 38 yards that Redden got on his 1 carry. What you're watching is a compilation of the other runs that the Browns had on the day, and it's not pretty. Take out the 5-yard run by Bernie Kosar, since that was not a design run, as Kosar was the quarterback and he just stepped up in the pocket and scrambled. Take out the 38-yard run by Redden. The rest of the players on the Browns, on design rushing attempts, managed to pick up 27 yards on 16 carries. Do the math on that, and the Browns were averaging, minus Redden, 1.6 yards per carry. Eric Metcalf had 11 carries for 19 yards, and his longest run of the game was 7 yards. He had 2 carries and went for 5+ yards. That was it. Keith Jones had 3 carries for 4 yards, with his longest carry being 2 yards. Tim Manoa had 2 carries for 4 yards. Somehow, in the midst of all that dysfunction offensively, they couldn't get the ball to Barry Redden anymore. Couldn't give him just 1 more carry, even though he had more rushing yards than the rest of the team combined on 1 play, and even though he scored the only touchdown of the game. As you continue to watch the Browns struggle to get any sort of running game going without Barry Redden touching it, you know what this is like? Let's say you're a PGA golfer and you're shooting a really bad round. All of your clubs seem to not be working for you. You're not getting the distance or the carry that you want. Nothing seems to be going straight, and you're not hitting greens in regulation. Then, on the 7th hole, you decide to pull out a 7-iron for the first time today from 180 yards out. And sure enough, you land it within 3 feet of the pin. And then, for the remainder of the round, despite having plenty of chances to do so, you just opt not to use your 7-iron. No more shots with the 7. You shoot a +9 and play like crap and miss the cut. And the only hole you got under par was the one that you used the 7-iron on. Seems really stupid, right? Well, that's what the Browns did here. Redden didn't speak with reporters after the game, but you can bet your bottom dollar that he was livid about the situation. We lose the game because we can't run. I go out there and get 38 yards and a touchdown on my only run, and you don't give me the rock for the entire second half, despite the situation clearly dictating that we need to run the ball? Explain that one to me, Coach Carson. Explain that one to me. Now, after the game between these two teams behind me right here, Barry Redden would never find the end zone ever again. He scored 11 touchdowns over the course of his NFL career, and this was the 11th and the final one, also making this the first and the only touchdown that he scored as a member of the Cleveland Browns. He did get some more playing time as the season went on after that play, as he had a game later in the season against the Indianapolis Colts where he had 10 carries. Having said that, he didn't really do a whole lot more afterwards. He played with the Browns for the rest of 1989, played a bit in 1990 during that disastrous campaign of theirs, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner, and then never played in the NFL again. I am not saying that Barry Redden was a good running back, far from it. But at least on this day, he was good. He was the hot hand. Something was working when he touched the ball. And the fact that he never got the ball again in the game between these two teams behind me right here is something that I will never understand for the life of me. Ride the hot hand. It's one of the #1 rules of life in anything that you do. and especially for making a critical decision where one person can seemingly do no wrong and everyone else can seemingly not do a single thing right. Barry Redden deserved better on this day. I'm not saying that the Browns win this game if they give Redden the ball more, but at the very least, it can't be any worse, seeing as they put up 0 in the second half and couldn't run the ball if their life depended on it. How involved you wanted to get Redden is up to you, but I think everyone minus Bud Carson for some reason would have given him, at a bare minimum, one singular touch in the second half, considering the flow of the game. He wouldn't have put up a goose egg. The Browns won the AFC Central and made it to the AFC Championship, so even in spite of the loss, this didn't matter in the long run. But still, the Browns have not played on Thanksgiving since 1989, and have never won a game on Thanksgiving ever. You can learn more about one of those losses by clicking the card in the upper right corner. Maybe things would be different if Barry Redden got involved more. But on this day in 1989, due to some idiotic coaching, Barry Redden was red. Be sure to like and subscribe if you have not done so already, as it helps the channel out a lot, and check out my other channels, JG8 for the history of college football, JG7 for the history of baseball, and JG9 News, where we talk about all things happening in the NFL. Join me every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, where we'll play live NFL trivia for cash prizes. And make sure to join me live, as we're on stream just about every single day. And thanks to all our Patreon members and our YouTube members for helping out the channel. See how you become a member and show your support financially in the description down below.